Hey, welcome guys. In this video I'm doing a comparison of two tablets released in 2019 at a very similar price point, have very different operating systems, but both were released in 2019. So they're going to be the iPad 7th generation up against the Samsung Galaxy Tab S5e tablet. Both of them also have similar screen sizes, so I think this is a very good comparison for those of you looking at, to buy a tablet this holiday season. Keep in mind that I'm doing things at a very high level, so I'm not going to get into too much detail and specifications of each tablet. That was done more in each tablet's review video. Links to those videos can be found in the video description. Let's start with how they look. The iPad has a 10.2-inch screen and is a very dated look. Not much has changed since the first generation model. It has huge bezels at the top and the bottom, and an oversized home button which also acts as a fingerprint reader. However, on that note, the fingerprint reader speed is fantastic, one of the best on the market. The Tab S5e has a slightly larger screen at 10.5 inches, but it is a very attractive design, and that's thanks to the very minimal thin bezels. The Tab also has a fingerprint reader, and for all of you, I have to say, believe it or not, they placed it in the thin power button, which works great. I don't know how Samsung did it, but they did. The difference in body designs are so comparable that even though the Tab has a larger screen, it's significantly smaller than the iPad. In addition to this, the Tab is also thinner and lighter than the iPad. Going over the screen technology, both look fantastic. In terms of how sharp they are and viewing angles, it's pretty good tie. Although I do find that the iPad has more natural looking colors when looking at photos, whereas the Tab has kind of like a saturation pop. You can take this as a good or bad thing, it's really up to you. The Tab has one clear advantage, and that its screen is a widescreen. This means that when watching videos on the iPad, because it's a 4:3 ratio, you get a lot of black bars and a lot of wasted space. Whereas on the Tab, because it's a widescreen, more of the screen is filled up with the video that you're watching. For speakers, the iPad has dual speakers at the bottom. Let's take a listen at max volume. I'll mount the TV, but more on that later. The bezels are quite small, which is great because this TV is coming in at a whopping $5,500. I wish Apple used the huge bezel space that's at the top and bottom of the screen to make the speakers front-facing instead. That would have been wicked awesome, but alas, they really missed the mark on that one. Going over to the Tab, it has 4 speakers, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom, and despite its smaller body design, it performs better than the iPad, obviously because it's double the amount of speakers. Let's take a listen at max volume. Later. The bezels are quite small, which is great because this TV is coming in at a whopping $5,500 US. And here in Canada, both tablets do have rear cameras that are so awful, I'm not going to get into details about it. It's just a waste of time because the quality is horrible. And not only that, you should never ever use cameras on a tablet. You look absolutely ridiculous. I notice mainly old people do this. Don't do that, please. Use your smartphone. It usually has a much better camera on it available. Both of them do have front-facing cameras, which makes perfect sense for video calling, which is great. However, again, the quality is awful. What they should have done is taken the better quality rear camera, put them on the front, and have no rear camera at all. And that extra space, by not having rear cameras, maybe they could expand the battery or I don't know, something else, some other parts that could benefit the tablets. For operating systems, things differ greatly here. The iPad has iPad OS version 13. It's version 13 because it's a recent spin-off of iOS, but this is the first real version of iPad OS itself. It's a little confusing, but whatever. The interface looks like the iOS has for almost the last 10 years, which is bad because it's dated and boring. It allows almost no customization and is incredibly dull. Apple hasn't really changed much here. The only real thing that's changed is that now on the far left, you do have your widgets that stick there. What makes this OS interesting is that iPad OS attempts to replace your laptop by allowing some multitasking features. One is a floating app feature, and you have the option to switch between recently used other apps. This can be kind of annoying when trying to get it up from the app drawer at the bottom because sometimes I'll accidentally close the app that I have open, or sometimes it won't drag up at all. Needs a bit of polishing here, but I do like the attempt that Apple has made. Although I find it really annoying that this has to be in the app drawer in order for you to use. The other multitasking feature is having 2 apps that take up the entire screen, and you're able to adjust the window size between the 2 apps if you wish to, which is great use of the screen space. In addition to this, there is also Sidecar, which allows you to use your iPad as a second monitor for your Mac. There are some prerequisites required in order to achieve this, but that can be found on Apple's website. The last major feature is file management of connected external devices. So you can connect external storage devices, copy them to your iPad, compress the files, and then move them to your iPad. Like, you have a whole bunch of options here, which is great. Unfortunately, the iPad is still using a lightning connector, so in order to connect your external device, you have to get an adapter which has a lightning connector on it, which is usually more expensive. Apple really is behind the industry in 2019. It should have had a USB-C connection. Unfortunately, that's not the case. The Tab S5e is running Android, which has Samsung's One UI, skin overlay on top of it, but it does allow a tremendous amount of customization, such as downloading additional themes, putting some live wallpapers, which are sometimes interactive, and adding unique widgets. Pretty much what's new with iPad OS, Samsung has been rocking for years, as well as a lot of other Android devices. In terms of multitasking on mobile devices, it was pretty much Samsung that made it popular years ago with the Note cell phone series. Just open your apps that you had recently opened in your task manager, tap the app icon, and you have the option to have a little app window pop up, which you can move around almost anywhere on the screen. You can have it transparent, and you can actually condense into a single little app icon that floats around anywhere on the screen and remains above, and you can actually do other work in the background if you wish to. You also have the ability to use dual apps in split view mode, which both apps do take up the entire screen. Of course, you do have the ability to adjust the size, just like I demonstrated on iPad OS. However, these features Samsung has been doing for many years now, even on their cell phones. It seems like it's just more of a catch-up game with the Apple products, but I'm still liking the direction that Apple's going in though. File management has always been easy to use and pretty much always accessible since Android first released to the public. It's really easy to do with third-party apps, but now it's kind of built in natively. In addition to this, it makes it even easier because you can have a micro SD card slot put into the tablet on the tab, and you have that permanent external storage connected at all times. Whereas connecting an external device to the iPad, you have this clunky adapter and your external device kind of hanging on the side. The main advantage here to this on that topic is that the iPad base model starts at 32 gigs of internal storage and no expandable storage option like a micro SD card you can just plug in. Whereas the Tab starts at 64 gigs base storage and you can connect a micro SD card slot. So storage is clearly the better option on the Tab. I'm very disappointed by Apple in 2019 because it's almost impossible to find a flagship Android device with less than 64 gigs, and Apple's still doing it with 32 gigs. I do have to mention Samsung is well known to have a ton of unique features, which I won't get into this video because this is just a quick overview video. But one of the cool things I do want to mention is screen mirroring from your tablet to other devices. This could be your Samsung smart appliances like the fridge, Samsung TV, or even your media players. So you have mirroring capability from your Tab to a lot of other devices that do not have to be Samsung branded. The iPad is running a super snappy and fast A10 processor, which is fantastic. However, the unfortunate thing here is that this is the exact same processor found in the previous generation model, the 6th gen iPad. The processor is identical, nothing's been really upgraded here. Although, just for day-to-day use or playing video games, whatever, it works phenomenal. On the Tab S5e, it's a similar situation here. It's a brand new processor for the Tab S5e. However, it's a dumbed down version of what you would find compared to, say, the Samsung cell phones sold this year. It was just a little bit slower than what you find on the flagship Samsung cell phones, which is rather unfortunate. So it seems like both companies have kind of compromised on slower processors, unfortunately. So the iPad has 3 gigs of RAM and the Tab has 6 gigs of RAM. And that's better for the iPad. I know that sounds crazy even though it has half the amount of RAM, but 3 gigs is more than enough to multitask and manage previously opened apps. The Tab S5e, this is actually a bad thing because it has too many previously opened apps running in the background. That means more battery being drained faster, so the iPad has a clear advantage here. On to battery. The iPad is wicked in this category with this 8827 mAh battery, whereas the Tab S5e has a 7040 mAh battery, which is the sacrifice of having a smaller, slimmer body compared to the iPad. Both last a week when using them for hours and hours throughout the week for watching videos, checking email, web browsing, and whatnot. However, I have to say closer to the end of the week, the iPad averages about 15% better in terms of battery usage thanks to the less RAM and bigger battery. But there is a twist to this though, so even though the iPad battery is significantly better, it takes almost 4 hours to recharge. 4 hours! whereas the Tab S5e has fast recharging and it charges in about 2.5 hours. Huge difference there. So which one do you want in terms of a media companion when you're traveling a lot? This is hard to answer, and it really comes down to your personal preference, because the iPad lasts longer, but it's harder to recharge, especially if you're on the go between terminals and stopovers. Whereas the Tab S5e lasts 15% less time average compared to the iPad, but it charges way faster, so it's easier to charge between stations and wherever you're stopping. Both use GPS, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi 5. Unfortunately, both don't have Wi-Fi 6 for some bizarre reason. I guess both companies decided to cheap out on that, so that's a little disappointing. If you're on a budget, which most people are, go for the iPad. Do not buy the Tab S5e. I say this with good reason. Remember, I said budget. And a lot of people tend to be, because people that usually buy this are usually traveling often. So of course you're spending a lot of money on flights and hotels. And of course a lot of students do love tablets. Great to just kind of lounge around in your dorm or your homeroom as you're just kind of lying in bed and just kind of chilling out. The iPad is significantly cheaper, especially here in Canada. Our exchange rate to the US dollar is about 76 cents. So the difference in price for the base models at least is quite large. In that sense, go for the iPad, especially if you have an Apple ecosystem with, a MacBook already. This works great hand in hand with it. If that's not really a concern for you, go with the Tab S5e. In almost every aspect in terms of hardware, it's superior easily. In terms of the features, you have an open operating system you can really customize and go crazy with. And all the new features that came with iPad OS, Android has had, for longer. Then of course get the Tab S5e. But this really comes down to personal preference. Well, you guys have all your notes from this video, I hope, and I do hope it helps you make a buying decision in the near future. Be sure to check out my social links in the video description, hit that like button, it does help, subscribe, and thanks for watching.